This is New Mexico Frontiers, presented by Veris Research.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on this edition of New Mexico Frontiers, the digital series. I'm Chad Brummett. So a little over 50 years ago, Apollo 17 went up to the moon, collected some samples. It was the last Apollo mission on the lunar surface. Now, those samples that were collected, they have sat in containment for about 50 years. Starting about 3 or 4 years ago, they started, or actually even before the pandemic, they started opening this up, and a whole new bevy of discovery happening on the lunar surface. And we are fortunate enough today to be joined by a man that probably knows a thing or two about this. You've been traveling around the country talking about it, doing a lot of research in this. Dr. Chip Shearer from the University of New Mexico, thanks for being with us. And I understand a welcome home is in order, because you have been traversing parts of the country talking about this very subject.
That's correct. Everybody's interested, particularly with regards to how this research fits in to the future of humans in space and returning to the moon, and how this really ties into a space economy.
Right. So lots of questions on this, and hopefully we'll get to unpack most of them. The first question that I have, that both our producer Fernando and I had when we were talking about this: why did we wait 50 years? Why didn't scientists dive into this back in 1972?
Well, I think what the main task for NASA was to explore other parts of the solar system. Okay. So they invested in putting more assets into near-Earth orbit to develop the near-Earth orbit Earth economy. And then, of course, there are many other planets out there besides the moon, and so they want to invest additional funds to go to Mars, for example, and to go to the outer solar system. So the moon was kind of put on the side, but now as we look toward the future and developing a space economy between the Earth and the moon and the space between. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies are now investing in this. NASA has decided that we need to continue exploring the moon.
Gotcha. Okay, so that seems like a very easy and a quick place to do it, is to go to the samples that we already had here on the planet.
As a first step, that's right.
As a first step, exactly.
Yeah.
So walk me through a little bit of this process. Now, before we started rolling, you said that they actually started unpacking these before COVID hit. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
What the whole process was, that due to the scientific community in the 1970s and NASA, they all had the foresight that they didn't want to analyze every sample that came back from the moon. So the decision was reached: let's save some samples as technology and analytical technology grows over the next few decades, and as our concepts evolve with regards to the evolution of the moon and our understanding of the solar system. That now we have these samples that have never been examined before, and were sealed on the surface of the moon.
What are we seeing on this? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but doing a little bit of looking on this, part of what they were looking at was looking at the volcanic activity on the lunar surface, or on the moon, and trying to see if there was volcanic activity at some point, or at least that was part of what they were looking for back in the 70s. What are we learning now that we are able to employ 21st century technology to look at these?
Well, what we can do right now, we can look at a finer scale. So we can look at nanometer scale objects. We also are able to analyze smaller and smaller samples with greater precision that allow us to unravel a lot of the questions we had about the moon.
What are some of those questions you think, or what are the questions that we're asking now as we're digging through this and analyzing the samples?
Well, one important question are volatiles and gases and potential resources on the surface of the moon. Okay. For example, in the South Pole of the moon, which is the target for the Artemis missions, there are areas in craters that are permanently shadowed. They've been shadowed for billions of years. Mm-hmm. and they're at temperatures of 25 degrees Kelvin, so almost to absolute zero.
Wow.
So these are unique areas that we don't know very much about, and some of the samples we collected and processed and analyzed provide us at least a method for looking at these samples and trying to understand volatiles on the surface of the moon. Because these are potential resources for human activity in the future.
Okay.
So these can be used, these resources, if they do exist, and we can process them, can be used to move along the surface of the moon, enhance our human activities, and then also then use the moon as a point that we can explore the other parts of the solar system.
Because that's the other idea, too, is that a Martian mission may not be something that necessarily can be done with just a straight shot from the Earth to the Martian planet. We need a pit stop, so to speak, on the lunar surface.
We need a pit stop, and if we have resources in space, it's a lot cheaper to essentially live off the land, if you will, rather than trying to bring the Earth with you.
Right. Now, in terms of that, now when we're talking about volatiles, my sort of layman's terms brain immediately thinks, are we looking for things that potentially pose a hazard or a danger to colonization? Is that what we mean by volatiles?
We're looking at both. We're looking at both potential resources. Like most people realize when you look up the moon, and the Apollo missions concluded that the moon was very, very dry, very little water. And so if we were going to send humans to the moon, they'd have to bring water with them. But in these permanently shadowed regions, there may be ice there, water ice, and there may be other volatiles there like CO2, carbon monoxide, that one could utilize for fuels, or one could utilize to grow plants. So there are a lot of possibilities, and it really changes the whole ball game with regards to whether you bring the Earth with you and resources with you, or whether the resources are there that you can utilize.
Certainly will help with the packing if we've already got the resources there. As you've been looking at this data and things have been unpacked, is there anything that stands out to you that you're excited about in terms of what we have been able to discover since these samples have been opened? Or are we still kind of looking for some sort of smoking gun of, yes, this is possible for us to colonize or develop?
Well, there's a few things that I think this program uncovered. One, just how one studies these types of samples with new technologies.
Okay.
And so we invested some money, and the European Space Agency partnered with us to develop technologies to open up these sealed samples. So, and then also, how does one process and handle these cold samples?
Right.
We now have technology that allows us to do that, and kind of a better understanding of how we could move forward with Artemis. Second, there's a lot of scientific questions that I think we've answered. One, with regards to where do volatiles reside and where are they trapped on the moon? That's one. Two, we sampled, or the Apollo mission sampled, a landslide deposit that came off the South Massif and spread into the Taurus Littoral Valley, where Apollo 17 landed. And so having a better understanding of what triggered that landslide, does it propose a hazard to future exploration or settlements on the moon, is really, really key. And then we also found a wide range of new rocks that we didn't find in any of the Apollo samples or find in lunar meteorites. And these unravel a bunch of additional questions with regards to the origin of the moon, and how it formed and how it differentiated.
Right. Well, and I think to me, it strikes me because it's a reminder on 2 points. First of all, there's still a lot of the lunar surface we don't know.
Yes.
Right. As you said, parts of it that have been in shadow for billions of years.
Yes.
But secondly, as we're learning that this is still an evolving moon, an evolving object in our solar system. So it does seem to me that it's, oftentimes we may think of the moon in sort of a passive way. Oh, it affects the tides. But no, it really is a very active part of our solar system and how the Earth fits into it.
That's right. That's right.
Now, moving forward, as you had mentioned, Artemis, that this is kind of the big thing to get us back to the moon. What do you think this is going to do to inform the trajectory of Artemis moving forward and future missions to the moon?
Well, one, I think it really informs us on how to collect samples on the surface of the moon better than probably we did during Apollo.
Okay.
Second, it tells us a little bit more about, how do we take those samples, bring them to Earth, and so they're not contaminated with Earth's atmosphere and with Earth contamination. So we really get a lunar fingerprint, chemical mineralogical fingerprint. But also what was really important about this program, and the program is called ANXA, the Apollo Next Generation Sample Analysis, is that it allowed me, because I was the group leader for this whole initiative, to essentially take people who were involved in Apollo, including Harrison Schmitt, the Apollo 17 astronaut, who was part of our team, and link them with the future generations. So this program really allowed the Apollo generation to communicate and interact with the Artemis generation. But also, it wasn't all in one direction. A lot of these kids, these early career people, are just remarkable.
Yeah.
And so what you really were able to do is all of the new approaches that a lot of the early career people and younger people know were transferred back to the Apollo generation.
Yeah.
So it was really a two-way street.
Wow.
In terms of sharing information, sharing techniques, etc.
And I think that there is something very special about that, obviously, because Artemis, you don't have Artemis without Apollo. You don't have Apollo without Apollo, 11 and 13 and all
That's
of
right.
the things. So really tying this multi-generation of astronauts and scientists
That's correct.
together, I think is so important to remind us where we are. So the last big question that I have is, does this transfer over into how we think of exploration to Mars? I know that's kind of the big white whale for so many scientists and astronauts and space explorers. Does this inform us in a positive way on getting to Mars?
I think what it does, it allows us to learn how to live in space for extended periods of times. Again, the moon is 3 days away. We can build an infrastructure there. But Mars is distant. It's, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months away.
Wow.
And so when you go to Mars, it really is one large odyssey in terms of traveling there. So being able to learn how to live, how to operate on a planetary body like the moon is important. Also, one has to really deal with health issues. And so traveling to Mars, you have health issues tied to bone loss. You have health issues tied to various solar wind and cosmic rays that could really impact an astronaut's health.
Yeah.
And so being able to build an infrastructure and operate on a planetary surface and maybe living off the land teaches us so much about Mars.
Yeah, and it really is interesting to think about. We think about living off the land here in a terrestrial sense.
Yes.
But now, as we enter into this 21st century and as space exploration and as the space economy, as you have said, continues to grow, we're going to have to, we first need to learn the land before we live off of it. So this is an opportunity.
That's right.
Now, I know that you have done a series of lectures on this. Do you have more in the future that you personally are going to be doing on this research?
Yes. In addition to this program that was funded by NASA and is now, we're slowly closing the doors on that type of research. we were fortunate to be funded again by NASA for over a period of 5 years for a program called SSERVI, Solar System Exploration Research Virtual Institute. And our team, which is centered again at UNM, is called Casa Moon, or Home on the Moon, right?
Okay.
And so we have enlisted a number of other universities and national labs within the U.S., but we also have a number of international partners that stretch all the way from Frankfurt, Germany, to Perth, Australia.
Wow.
And so we have on this team 60 to 70 individual scientists, engineers, early career people, previous Apollo scientists. And so now what we're doing is we're looking closer at all the Apollo samples that may be relevant to the Artemis missions and the samples that will be returned by the Artemis missions. And then we're also looking at applications, like how does one modify the lunar soils in order to allow you to grow things in the lunar soils. And some team members at the University of New Mexico have grown New Mexico chilies in space and are growing tomatoes in space. So eventually the astronauts at the space station will be able to make their own salsa, New Mexico salsa, right?
Which is really important. I mean, it's one thing to pack the hatch green chili if you're going
that's
to the
right.
It's easier to just kind of grow it there.
And actually the best chili to grow in space is a Chimayo chili.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That's what I
yes.
hear. It's got that really sweet sort of taste, and it's
And-
very hearty and does
That's
well
right.
there.
And also what we're doing is we have a group at UNM that are essentially using simulant lunar regolith and simulant Martian regolith. Those are soils on the surface to do 3D printing. And so potentially what one could do is print building blocks that one could utilize for outposts, if you will, on planetary surfaces.
Again, so using those resources that are there instead of hauling the lumber, hauling the bricks.
That's right.
That would be a long process.
And so the goal is, again, my goal, I've been in New Mexico for 35 years. I'm not a native, but I've been here a while, and I love New Mexico. And New Mexico can be involved in this growing space economy, both in low Earth orbit, but also in this cis-lunar space.
Yeah.
And that's really, near the end of my career, my goal is to grow the New Mexico space economy.
Yeah. Well, I know that you are in good company. There's a lot of people hoping to do that. Can we find you on social media? Are you published? Can we learn more about all the work that you do?
Yes. At UNM, if you go to the Casa Moon website, you can find out about our activities there. We also have a Casa Moon song called Artemis that we hired a Bay Area metal band
to
put together. Because this whole journey is meant to be not just focused on science and engineering. It's supposed to be very broad. So bringing in music, and we also funded a bunch of artists to do moon art. So we're involving a larger and larger community and taking everybody into space and everybody to the moon.
Well, I know it is a lofty goal, but it sounds like you guys are doing it the right way with a very broad, expansive view on this. Chip, thank you so much for your time this morning. This has been really eye-opening and really fascinating. And obviously, the work that they are still uncovering, the work that lies ahead of us, is going to open literally new worlds to us. So we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much. It was so nice to be here and to be able to visit with you.
Yeah,
this
likewise.
is truly exciting.
It really is. I'm excited to see what the next chapters are, especially with UNM being part of this. As an alum, I absolutely love that. And I think it's, like you said, we are, I think, going to play a very pivotal role in the emerging space economy. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And folks at home, thank you for joining us and watching this. If you did not watch it on the KRQE Now app and you don't have it on your smart TV, your Apple TV, make sure that you download it there. You can also find more information and other episodes at krqe.com. Until next time, I'm Chad Brummett. This has been New Mexico Frontiers, the digital series.